This is the North Carolina Food and Beverage Podcast. Thank you for listening, subscribing, and hitting subscribe on your friend's phone without them knowing. Coming to you from the kitchen studios in downtown Raleigh. This episode is sponsored in part by Blue Shark Vodka. All the taste without the bite. Blue Shark Vodka coming out of Wilmington, North Carolina. And by Spot On, tech that helps your business grow. And Joe Van Gogh Coffee, serving the community from seed to cup. And now, with food dying in the window as they're chatting at the table, it's Max Trujillo and Matthew Weiss.
Hello, and thank you for listening to the North Carolina Food and Beverage Podcast. I am your co-host, Max Trujillo.
And I am your co-host, Matthew Weiss. And today we are lucky to have in the studio TV's new budding star, the star of The Key Ingredient with Sheri Castle.
That would be me. Thank you for that warm welcome.
Thank you for being here.
Welcome to the studio.
Yes, they're lovely. This is amazing.
We grew up, you know?
Yeah, exactly. I'm taking notes. I intend to do that someday.
I know you can't see this on TV, but Max has like a button-down shirt tucked in, wearing a belt, and like...
I've got like leather loafers on, like
what's
suede
going on?
loafers.
Usually he's in flip-flops and like board shorts.
I usually say if I have fewer than 3 food groups on my shirt, I'm dressed up. You know, so.
Right. There's no... You're really dressed up today. There's not one food group on the shirt.
It's early. It's early in the day.
Yeah. Well, you wore dark, so that's good.
Yeah.
You know, you can splash it all around. Well, welcome to the studios. We're so happy to have you in, and we're so happy to be talking about what you have just released to the world. The Key Ingredient, as Matt mentioned, which just premiered. I guess it just premiered last week. Well, it depends on when this episode comes out, but it premiered
Thursday
a couple
the
weeks.
23rd.
There you go. On PBS. We know it and love it well. And I watched the inaugural episode last night with my wife, and it was all about cornmeal. Cornmeal, and I loved it from beginning to end. It was so cool. We'll get into the particulars about it at a bit, but let's talk about you, Sheri.
Okay.
You've been a fixture in this industry for a good while. As we were poking fun a little bit earlier, I think somebody has. You've been noted as a living legend in the North Carolina food industry.
Yes, and they actually said it was a living legend in Southern food. And I do want to point out that the first adjective is living, which means my sole criteria was, is she dead? And I wasn't. So that got me halfway there.
That
nice.
clarified it right away. Yeah.
And then, no, that was a wonderful...
the Southern Foodways Alliance called you
Yes,
that, by the way, in 2019. So that's a pretty
right.
big deal.
Well, it was very kind of them. And it's always humbling and odd to see people say nice things about you in print. But I will tell you what meant the most is they call me a storyteller, which anybody that has known me for any length of time knows that that's what means the most to me. So them acknowledging that and saying kind things about it meant a lot. It really did.
Yeah, that must mean a lot to you because it's been said that you knew you were going to be a food writer since the age of 4 years old.
Oh, yeah, that's actually true. I'm interested. Not necessarily that I knew I was going to be a food writer. It was all in hindsight.
Okay.
But I will say that I wrote my first original recipe, which is now what we would call a smoothie. It was a fruit concoction I made in my grandmother's brand new avocado green blender.
Oh, wow.
And
that was really like for that time. That was cutting edge.
We were just starting to drive automobiles instead of horses back then. It was really quite
way to go, Matt.
But anyway, I made this thing and I wrote this recipe. I wrote a little story to go with it. I drew a picture of it and sent it off to a television show when I was 4 years old. So in hindsight, I guess some of this was destined, but it was never the grand plan. There was not a day where I said, okay, what I'm going to be is a food writer or a cook or anything. It just happened.
But you knew from a very early age that there was a love of food, of the ingredients, and that was going to be sort of your life's mission.
Yes, I did for some reason that I cannot explain at a very early age understand that there was a correlation between what you ate and who you were. And I think that at the end of the day, that's still what I kind of go to for a food story is what are they eating and what does this say about who they are?
It's like you are what you eat. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and it's not always that simple, but it can be that simple. That, food isn't just what's on a plate. It's, ingredients. which is why we did the show we did. It's people's relationships with traditions. Food can be an expression of personality, of priorities, of economic status, ecology, geology, families. Food is sort of like a consumable archaeological study.
No doubt.
Yeah, and that's the story behind all that is what floats my boat every day.
No doubt that you had this growing up, because from the first episode of the show, we find that your father has been, who is featured in the episode, he's been working in the kind of almost like the manufacturing side of the food industry.
Actually, that's not entirely true. There's everything you
is
said.
This movie magic we're discussing here?
No, it's not. Okay, that really was my dad. I think anybody can see
Yes,
there's a familiar
that was your dad.
resemblance. He's not a ringer. My dad had nothing to do with the world of food. My dad was an engineer and worked, he's just a guy that had a job, went and did his job, worked in the place for 42 years. But he's a guy that likes stuff, especially if it involves motors and engines. That was always his passion. And about 15 years ago, we were sitting in his backyard, and I cannot for the life of me remember what led up to this conversation. But he said, well, you know that I have Papa Will's mill. And I said, you've got what? My dad is what I like to call him, for those that grow up in the country like I did. My dad's one of those blue tarp men where there are these lumps in the yard and stuff under blue tarps. And lo and behold, one of them was this mill that my great-grandfather, whose name was Will Reese, had purchased new in 1923. Will's Mill. Well, yeah, I never thought about that. But anyway, and my dad had this just as among the things that he had inherited. And when he found out that this made me deliriously happy because I was a professional cook by then, he said, well, let's get it up and running. And so we found someone that, could get it up and running and refurbished and the stone sharpened. And since then, starting as our just personal use and amusement, and then a little bit for like heritage festivals and so forth, never as a commercial endeavor, we started grinding our own cornmeal. And I think the first time that we did we maybe did 5 or 10 pounds just to see if we could. And now we're up to probably 1,500, 2,000 pounds a year, mainly as gifts. It's not commercial. You can't buy it. You just have to know us and we'll give you some.
That's a lot of gifts.
That's a lot of gifts. It is. And a lot of cornbread. We eat a lot of cornbread in my family. That's our daily bread. So anyhow, when I was going over ingredients for the show, and each show is about an ingredient.
A key ingredient.
A key ingredient, exactly, in all the permutations of what key and ingredient can mean. I got to pick a list, and I started out with a long list, and then we started paring down when we figured out how many episodes we could produce. And one of my ingredients was cornmeal. And I had not brought up this thing with my dad at all, but we did know that we wanted to have some sort of a field trip, literally, in each episode where we go find some little something about somebody that makes it, grows it, fishes for it, produces it, whatever it is. Yeah. And I said in passing, like, well, my dad and I think somebody said, where do you get your cornmeal? I'm like, well, I grind it, which is sort of a leading answer.
Right.
And then it came up about Dad, and then we did this. And at the time, that was not going to be our first episode. But I think that actually the producer chose the perfect thing because it's not only about where does this ingredient come from, but it's a little tiny glimpse of where I came from. It's literally in my parents' backyard.
Well, and that's part of it. Like, you didn't even realize that was a unique aspect of your own life because that's just part of your life. But I will tell you, it's not too like my mom and I, we don't really grind a lot of corn together. That's not a thing that most families do.
No,
Matt,
that's true.
When do you get to the old mill with the pops?
We only get to grind corn like once every now and then.
Yeah.
So, we never grind corn.
And it is unusual, and I don't mean to make light of it. It's a really wonderful, usual thing. That, first of all, that we own this thing, that it has persisted for 98 years, that was operable, that my dad and I know how to do it, that I have this thing for cornmeal. I mean, it is a wonderful thing that sounds orchestrated, but I swear to God, it was just a series of random things.
Sheri, I love because it's a natural segue into your show, and you just gave us a natural segue because blue North Carolina corn is the key ingredient in none other than
Blue Shark Vodka. What? Coming out of...
It's like we rehearsed.
Wilmington. Yeah, that darn corn. It just shows up when you need it most. But whether you're hanging out on the front porch with your pops milling corn, or you're shaking it up over some ice inside of a vodka drink, that corn is going to be useful. This particular corn, this North Carolina sweet corn, is distilled 4 times into perfection. That small batch process is a labor of love for the team over at Blue Shark Vodka. After that mash mellows for 28 days, it allows those flavors to fully bloom and awaken, and then it is triple filtered, giving each vodka a smooth, clean finish, making that quote-unquote alcohol bite nearly vanish. This has earned Blue Shark Vodka the clever nickname, the shark that doesn't bite. So, go to bluesharkvodka.com for more information. Go to your ABC stores, and if you don't see it on your shelf, you can ask them, nay, demand it, to be put out on your shelves. Get your Blue Shark Vodka. It's delicious. Shake it up. You got a lot of holiday cocktails coming up soon, so check out their website for more information. They have some great recipes there as well.
I just want to take a minute to also tell you, especially all the chefs that come on to the Key Ingredient, something that helps their business would be Spot On. Spot On works with popular local restaurants like the Ruddy Duck Tavern and the Village Market in eastern North Carolina and gets them all set up with technology they need to stay competitive in the industry. It's the kind of tech that the chain down the street is already using, but it's made specifically for your business or your restaurant. It's like a cloud-based point of sale system that not only takes orders and payments, but it also ties into online ordering for takeout and delivery. Then it breaks down all the data so you can tweak your menu or set your staff schedule. From fine dining food to food trucks, Spot On's integrated restaurant management system can help make running a restaurant less stressful and more successful. And you can get this end-to-end solution built specifically for your needs by a real person, Tanya Manibo. She's a local Spot On account executive, and she'll be your partner the whole step of the way. Just give her a call, 858-213-7820, or email her, tanyam@spoton.com, because at Spot On, business is personal.
But we were talking about corn. We're talking about your pops. Sidebar, when in watching the show, I looked over. Explain the beautiful white Corvette that looks like maybe a 57, 63, somewhere in there.
It's a 62. Good
62.
eye. Good eye.
And is it a Chevy pickup?
It's a 56 Cameo pickup, yes. So I said earlier that my dad...
I love this stuff.
Well, as I said, my dad, anything with a motor, wheels, stuff like that, that is what he loves.
He didn't not put that right in the background. Like, oh, we could just close this garage door. He's like, no.
Okay, I got to
show off the vet.
There was actually a reason. He did have the garage doors down, and it was giving us a terrible visual background because it was boring gray garage doors, and we couldn't reorient the mill because it takes us like 6 or 8 hours to set that thing up. You just don't whip it around on a dime.
Yeah.
And so we raised the garage doors to get a better shot. And then I will tell you guys, so this show, again, it came out on September 23rd. We're talking less than a week later. I've gotten many wonderful, heartfelt, gratifying compliments and notes and kudos and stuff, and 9 out of every 10 of those are about my dad. So he's clearly the breakout star of this.
He's the Kramer of the Key Ingredient.
And then probably half of those were about the cars in the background. So again, it wasn't the intention. It was that we were getting a terrible thing off of the garage doors down, and we put them up. And lo and behold, it became more of a backdrop than any of us imagined at the time.
Wow, those cars are pretty rad.
Yeah, they are.
Awesome.
They are.
It's a visual medium. You have to have
Exactly.
those exciting things in the background.
So many of you don't know this, but and why would you? But the Trujillo household is going through a little home remodel right now. I only bring that up because during this time we are displaced from our house while the floors are being redone and all. Former guest of the show, Preeti Waz, is turned into quite a friend of mine recently. And from the taping of this, yesterday was her anniversary with her husband, John, who is a fantastic person. They are letting us stay at their guest house just in North Raleigh. And all the Trujillos are bundled up inside of one room with our dog. And it's quite cozy. It's nice. And they have this beautiful backyard. I bring up all of this because Preeti, who is a fantastic chef and has Cheeni right down the street over here, is, of course, of Indian descent, and she conducted a cooking class in her outdoor kitchen over the weekend. And so my daughter and I, along with about 8 people from the local neighborhood, just came in, and we just watched her make, she's going to hate me because I've didn't take my notes exactly the name of what she was making, but essentially making masala, which she explained is basically like a sauce, Indian style. And she was going through all the particular flavors and the base and how to, you start with your aromatics and you really just crush them. You cook them out so hard and doing this. So it's really fresh in my mind. Cut to watching the show last night. You were starting to cook with Cheeti Kumar of Garland, who is just a block away from our studios here as well. And it was like I was watching the show again because Cheeti's technique and style was not too dissimilar from Preeti's. And just looking at kind of the understanding, it was so great to hear two amazing chefs reiterate the fundamentals of the Indian cuisine, basically 3 days away from each other. I'm like, wait a minute, I just heard this, and I just heard this again. Oh, this is awesome. And I love that shared technique is so strong. And so it was wonderful for me to see this again. But I would love to ask you, because you brought her into your kitchen, or it was a test kitchen, or
that was actually
beautiful home?
That was actually a gorgeous, gorgeous kitchen in a condo on St. Mary Street, just a few blocks from here. That they graciously let us use that kitchen, because you'll notice that all of the chefs, when you see all 8 episodes, most every guest is a professional chef in some capacity, but we're cooking at home with them, even if it's not literally their home because there's not room for a crew in their home.
Sure.
It's not in their restaurant capacity. It is things that they make at home from a home perspective. But I'm glad you said about fundamentals, because there's lots of things that a cooking show can be about, or a food show can be about. And I didn't want to do just another traditional stand and stir. And as most people know, that's when it's those shows, and we've all seen them, and some of them are very good, where you stand in one spot and you just make a recipe. I wanted something to be broader than that, but I wanted that level of practicality, because I'm hoping that people will take away some little tip or hint, a fundamental, like how do you begin an Indian recipe, or how do you know when your skillet is hot enough, or how do you know blah, whatever it might be.
Take care of your iron cast
Take
skillet.
care of your cast iron skillet, exactly. So even if they don't make my recipe or Cheeti's recipe or the recipe of another one of these great guests, and I hope that they will, but even if they don't, that there might be some little useful gem that they can apply to what they do make. Having some sort of usefulness in this show was really what I kept coming back to, because it's the way I've written my books, it's the way I write for magazines. I think that things ought to be useful, and I hope that at the end of the day that there's an element of that there.
You answered my next question, because my question was, how does this show different from all the other cooking shows? And that's it. That's the buy-in, is you take away, you take a useful thing to bring in your own cooking life.
I think there's that, and that, I like a good yarn. I like to ask. I like to hear what people have to say about food. I like to know where it comes from. I like to give people ideas. It's a very story-driven, practical show, if that's not a mixed metaphor.
No, and so the format of the show, will it always be consistent? Like, it focuses on an ingredient, and then a chef who makes that in their signature dishes or what they make at home?
Yes, not necessarily in that order, but all of those parts will be there. So, sometimes you snap your Legos together in a different order.
Sure.
But yes, in every episode, they're all focused on a single ingredient. There will be at least 2 recipes from me, 2 cooking segments from me where I'm in the kitchen that we used and prepare something. And then I will cook somewhere with a guest. Sometimes we're outdoors. Sometimes we're in a gorgeous condo in downtown Raleigh. We've been in a barn. We've been, all sorts of things. Wherever they are, I went to them. And then there will be some element, for lack of a better term, a short field trip. Where did it come from? What does it look at? What can I tell people about this that maybe they don't know? Like, we're doing an episode on field peas. Most people, if they've ever contemplated field peas at all, they think, oh, that's black-eyed peas, and you're supposed to eat them on New Year's Day for good luck.
Right.
Well, the truth is there are over 1,500 kinds of field peas. They're one of the most misunderstood and underappreciated legumes in the world, which is why I chose to do them. Pumpkins. If people take anything away from that whole episode, I hope they will never again try to eat their jack-o'-lantern. I had modest goals, that sort of thing. So, yes, all those elements here. What is it? A little bit about where it's from. What do I do with it? And what does someone else do with it? Because, you could do 10 years of shows on just one ingredient. There is no single answer. What I do with cornmeal is different from Cheeti. What I do with apples is different from Meherwan Irwani, who's my guest on another one. What I do with cabbage is different than what Joe Kwon does with his. So the idea is that there is no single approach to these ingredients, but they're all fun and they've got potential, and they're probably things people haven't given a lot of thought to before.
Yeah.
That's what I liked with talking about the fundamental aspect. Is it similar in a sense that, like, if I'm building a cocktail program or so, I don't get mired in the details with the particular end result so much as I'm looking at the technique and the build and all of those ingredients, whatever it is, they can all mix, mash, change, evolve, go wherever. And that's kind of, for you, the end user, kind of the artist or just the home cook or chef or bartender, that's for you to decide. And I like you touched upon that with Cheeti in that, she was making the savory coconut cornmeal upma, and which was basically like a porridge, and then simultaneously as she's making the porridge, has some vegetables, and you mentioned it. You're like, this is just kind of like garden variety, pardon the pun, but like it's just whatever was in the fridge, because that's what the flavors are going to be today. So it's like, let's not get married too much to the fact that you're throwing in mushrooms and kale and whatever it might have been. It wasn't kale, but it was something.
Actually, it was kale and mushrooms and sweet potatoes.
There you go. Yeah, but it's more about the technique, the intention, and so you could take whatever you're doing, but replace it with anything, and then you're going to have something that fits your version. And I've said that to people all day long. It's like cocktails. You got a Negroni, it's 3 parts. You got vermouth, you got gin, you got a bitter. Well, the bitter could be anything. There's so many different things that can be put in there. And then vermouths are so widely ranged. And then, of course, gin, so many different flavors. So pick whatever you want. Just use the framework of the...
Are you saying that in that scenario, the gin is the key ingredient in the Negroni? Because I think that's what we're getting at, right?
Thank you.
Matt's still in the writer's room over here writing jokes.
He had to circle way out and come back on that one, but it worked.
Sometimes I gotta lasso Max in, But I mean, yeah,
But it was good. So I like getting all the fundamentals put out inside, because I feel like the usefulness of your show is that it's not you're watching it so that you can get a recipe to cook tonight. It's so that you can actually understand. It's the teach a man to fish rather than cook the fish for them.
Exactly.
So I appreciate the intention behind your show, and it's a little bit bigger in a scope than just this is the dish we're making today.
Right.
Which
well,
was
good. I'm glad it came across, because that was my intention. I've been a cooking teacher for a long time, written 16 cookbooks, stacks and stacks and stacks of magazine grids. I've been very lucky that I've had a lot of platforms, but it came back to what's the story and what's the point, And I think that at the end of the day, if you can't answer that, you probably shouldn't be doing the piece.
And so how did it come up? Like, how did your people get in touch with PBS's people?
It was the other way around. It was the other way around. Yeah,
Ooh,
honest to God.
That's flattering.
It is, and shocking. I'm still not over it. Just over a year ago, I got a phone call that said, we want you to be in a TV show for us. Truly.
Waiting for that phone call to happen.
I think it happened. They must have lost my... They keep thinking it's 919 and a 917 area code, so that's what happens.
this and like I said, it was not the result of me pitching anything, because I would never have had the audacity to do that. I mean, but they came to me and they assigned me to an incredible producer named Heather Burgess, who's worked for PBS for a long time, and they said, "Let us know what you guys come up with." I mean, it was that sort of broad of a creative
That's
opportunity.
Amazing. Do you have any idea, like, why your name came across?
Because I'm really good at what I do. No, I'm just kidding.
That was a given.
That came across.
No.
But
like, did they read a certain piece in a magazine? Did somebody and like we gotta get Sheri on?
I've been around a long time. That's maybe the upside of being old. Like I said, I'm still alive, so I can be a living legend.
You're living.
And I mean, I've done a lot of things. I've been guests on TV shows. I've written all these books. I have been, I've written fiction. I've taught thousands of cooking classes. There was something in that hodgepodge of mess of this catalog of work I've done over these decades that made them say, I think she's our person. And so, the proof, we'll see. We'll see if they still say that in a few months.
Are you a trained writer, like a schooled writer?
Yes,
like, know how to write
Yeah.
journalistically.
If you were to meet me, like, sit down, idle cocktail party chat, or sit next to me on an airplane or something and say, what do you do for a living? I'd say I'm a writer. That's the word I would use.
You're like, I'm TV's Sheri Castle.
Oh, no, I would never
maybe
do
after
that.
the third episode comes out, we'll see.
But I've often said, truly, I'm a writer who cooks and I'm a cook that writes because, I don't do both of those things every day, but I do both of those things every week. Some days I'm behind the computer, some days I'm behind the stove.
Your house is probably the most valuable asset you own. But think about it. How much time do you spend taking care of it day to day? Enter Exhale, where you get a dedicated home manager who takes the time to understand your home's unique needs and ensures cleaning, maintenance, and inspections are taken care of. And if you need help with repair or improvement, Exhale will handle that too. Visit exhaleathome.com to learn more and book a consultation. We'll take it from here.
So, Sheri, this is the real, life hack takeaway. I mean, the ingredients are obviously great and useful, but for all, I am so jealous, I guess, for lack of a better word, but also, I mean, it's so admirable for people such as yourself who figure it out from a young age. Like, this is what I want to do. I know this is the area, and I am intentionally going to work my life towards that path. Because, I did not, and we've talked about this on the show before with, Inez Rubistello being at 22, she knew she wanted to be a sommelier and a wine director. And I was I didn't have an inkling till I was 30,
But I got to tell you, I don't know if this will be liberating, if it will burst your bubble. I hope it's liberating. I did not have that plan.
Okay.
In hindsight, it seems ordained or inevitable.
Yeah.
That was not my intention. I thought I was going to be an English professor that wrote charming novels in between semesters. I mean, that's how idealistic I was. So I've written for the government, for broadcasting, for software firms, I've written for lots of things.
Right.
But what I always did in my own time was cook. And so,
So it kind of added up, though.
But I will say that for me, naivete is far more effective than ambition. Because if I were ambitious and grappling for all this, I would be so intimidated. I don't know how to do any of that. So I just sort of stumbled forward and have been lucky that it added up to something.
So what you're saying is there's nothing I can take away. No,
I think what she's saying,
ignorance is bliss in that scenario. I just think
what she's saying, Matt, is your story. It hasn't been written yet.
Right. And I will say, if you're going to be self-employed, some people call that entrepreneurship. I just call it self-employed, which I have been since the 90s. Mm-hmm. The more things you can do, the more useful you are to people.
Right.
You can't be a one-trick pony in this world anymore.
Right. No, and
so the fact that I was able to write and I was able to cook and was able to, more or less form full sentences in front of audiences, and I can cook while I talk and things like that. That wasn't a plan. I'm just lucky that people can come to me for a variety of things that I can hope to do.
I had a conversation with someone recently where it's we were talking about management and staffing and organizing people, but I said, sometimes you gotta get your hands dirty and you yourself have to do the actual work. And you have to, you can cook as well as write and speak. And so those are things that not everyone has the power to do or the want to do, but you have to be able to utilize all of those things together if you're truly going to make yourself, set yourself apart.
Right. And, I hope it comes across in the show, or I hope it just comes across in the work. It's just me. I mean, I don't have a staff. I've never had an employee in my life. I've never hired anybody to do anything. So it was just us, a small group of people. We were making this during COVID, so we had strict regulations on how many people could be in the square feet. Mm-hmm. We just made food and talked to these people, and it's not so naive. It's like, hey kids, let's put on a show, but it was sort of like that. So if things they're not highly styled, there was no stylist on the set, there was no anything. I made food the way that I would make it in my house, and I hope that comes across as honest instead of bumbling, because it's not. It's a gorgeously produced show. It's not a slick production.
Do you script the show at all, loosely? No.
The only thing that, yes and no. Most of it is just me being me. There was no script when I'm in the kitchen and stuff. I mean, I would have some notion of what we were going to talk about, but it's very much, I think I would have had the same conversation if the cameras had not been there.
Sure, but what about as far as okay, we're going to cook in this kitchen, then we're going to go to my dad's house, then we're going to like that.
We did know that. We did, again, to use the lame Lego thing, we had to know what the Legos were.
Yeah.
And then figure out how to snap them together. But no, there was a plan that in every episode, we're going to go here, here, and here and do this, this, and this.
Right.
So that in the end,
the storyline.
In the end, the producer and the editor had something to work with.
Yeah. This scene is going to take you from here to here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Let's talk about some of your episodes that you have upcoming. Looking at these, a great list of guests that you're going to have coming up. I see Jamie Swafford and Kia Mastriani, whom we first met, I want to say, at Lambstock. Kia is a fantastic food writer, and Jamie, I think at the time, was just kicking off his bitters and his...
He's making shrubs and all these delicious things.
He was doing that, and they are wonderful people, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what they do, because Jamie himself is a farmer, and isn't he the chef's farmer?
The chef's farmer, because he used to be a restaurant chef, and now he grows this amazing things. And he is my guest, my cook guest, and my field trip guide for field peas.
He is such a cool dude. I love what he has going on. And Kia as well. She is a wealth of knowledge when it comes to the food industry as well.
Yes, and the best pie. I mean, her business is Milk Glass Pie, and she's a great food writer, and she's the queen of crimp. She can crimp an edge of a pie crust in ways that will just bring tears to your eyes.
And looking beyond too, the aforementioned Joe Kwon of course, the Avett brothers. He's been on our show. We did that show off-site at his house, of which he no longer lives.
He still lives in North Carolina?
California when we did this one remotely together, and it's very. I mean, he's in California, I'm in Chatham County, and we cook together through the miracle of modern technology. Yeah,
that's cool. What was his ingredient?
Cabbage.
Oh, that would make sense, because we talked a long time about him growing up in a Korean household, making kimchi and all, and with the family putting together. So I imagine there's a lot of great content coming out of that.
There is an anecdote that came up in our conversation, and I'm not going to spoil it.
Yeah.
That nobody, well, maybe some people, they will swear that we planned this ahead of time. It's this obscure, bizarre thing that his grandmother and my grandmother did that's exactly the same, that I cannot believe it came up in conversation. That's my teaser for that episode.
That's nice. I love that.
Like that.
It's fun. But looking at some of your guests, you represent. I feel like you represent the Piedmont area of North Carolina specifically. Is that because you live in the Blue Ridge Mountains, right?
I grew up in the Blue Ridge Mountains. But that is, I mean, there are great people in North Carolina. There are great people, don't they? Also, you got to remember, this was in the heart of COVID. We could only go so far. There were some very both legal and practical limitations to what we could do, which made us have to figure what's the most we can do with what we have. We could not leave the state. There were just lots of practical things that confined our guests, with the exception of one, to the state. And nothing wrong with that. I think you could pump from this well richly for years and years.
Sure.
Also have got great ideas for things outside the state if I ever get that opportunity.
There's something that is grown outside the state that we also just put into your mug.
It's delicious coffee.
This delicious coffee, which is by Cafe Feminino, which is a brand that coexists with our good friends from Joe Van Gogh Coffee. And Cafe Feminino, just want to take a quick mention about it. I mean, for one, isn't that coffee ridiculous?
It's so good.
The way it's brewed, for one, is champion brewer Matthew Weiss is really, I give about 94% of the whole coffee tasting experience to his brewing ability. But that other 6% is all Cafe Feminino. But Cafe Feminino is giving women their fair share since 2003. Cafe Feminino's coffee program is a one-of-a-kind ethical sourcing model committed to ending the cycle of poverty affecting women coffee farmers across the world. Cafe Feminino provides direct compensation to women farmers, along with the opportunity and resources to enact positive change in their communities and on their own terms. So you can learn more by going to cafefeminino.com. You can check the show notes on our podcast, and you can also get Cafe Feminino and Joe Van Gogh Coffee at so many locations in the Triangle area, from Hillsborough to Durham, to Raleigh and even just around the corner here in Raleigh downtown over at Sir Walter Coffee. Sorry. So check them out. The fantastic coffee. It's delicious. And now we're back.
Good coffee. Yes, I've seen this product at Weaver Street. I live near a Weaver Street in Borough. And yes, so thank you. Thanks to everyone that had a hand in that coffee.
Right?
Right.
Yes.
Seriously.
Mainly Matt, but yeah.
Yeah, mainly me. I take all the credit. Sheri, what about? I love what you said about how, and it's something that we know, but when somebody like you says it, it reverberates so much more about the idea of what you eat is who you are, and it says so much about your geographic, your socioeconomic position in life, and like I just think about we did this thing called Bubbles and Brisket, and Brisket. Said a lot about where you were and who you are if you ate brisket, because it was like a tertiary cut, like poor people, for lack of a better term, ate brisket because it wasn't, thought of as very, very fine. And now everybody wants brisket. That's what they want for barbecue. Any other things like that come up on the show, or aha moments, like you said, about the field peas that we could be excited to watch that come to mind off the top of your head? I know I'm putting you on the spot here.
Well, I think you're right. I think that you could put on the sorting hat, depending on how people react to words. So take brisket, like you're talking about. You could find a good starting point for a lot of conversation with people is when they hear the word brisket. Do they go barbecue? Are they thinking grandma's house for a Shabbat supper? Da-da-da. I mean, right there.
Yeah.
Things. So I think that sometimes there is, you can find out a context for a person with an ingredient. Someone asked me the other day, said, what's the most surprising ingredient? Well, probably field peas. But the one where I really was the most excited and maybe had to campaign a little bit for is we did an entire episode on buttermilk.
Oh, right.
And if at the end of my days, my daughter thinks I'm a good mom, and I have gotten even one other human to stop trying to make buttermilk by pretending you can curdle regular milk, then my life's journey on this planet is done.
Oh, wow.
And I would be the no longer living legend who went out with buttermilk on her lips.
Yeah, I never have buttermilk at hand or on hand, so I'm always taking like sour cream and milk and trying to do that.
And it don't do.
Right.
I mean, it's not. As I said, and somebody quoted me on it recently, I was like, think you can curdle milk with vinegar and lemon juice and have buttermilk is the same thing as taking a flat, stale, backwash Diet Mountain Dew out of the cup holder and replacing it for champagne because they're both wet.
That's pretty damn extreme.
Yeah. I feel my passion about these things.
No doubt.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's I did say somebody what was it? I read somewhere that one of your little a little snack or something that you would like to have was a little bit of buttermilk with cornmeal just put in and you ate with a spoon.
Okay, so
I read this out loud to my daughters, by the way, and they went,
and
that sounds disgusting.
Well, I've got to
Must
tell you,
be
it's
in a
not
drinking
just
glass.
Yes, it's not just your daughters. I would say that probably, except for a handful of us, most of the planet would have that reaction. So here's the thing: we're talking about food and culture and background.
Yeah.
When I was growing up, and by the way, none of us knows we're growing up with a culture at the time. You're just a kid eating
it
supper.
just
You feel me?
is.
None of us knows that at the time. But a very common thing to do with leftover buttermilk was to put it in a drinking glass. I cannot explain why, but in a drinking glass, not a bowl, and put milk on top. Some people put just regular milk, but some people put buttermilk, and you eat the crumbled cornbread with the milk like you'd eat a bowl of cereal.
Yeah.
I mean, think of it that way.
Yeah.
And when you're a kid, again, you don't know what you're eating is atypical or unusual because you just think everybody, until you get out in the world a little bit, you think your family is the sample set of the universe.
Right. You don't have perspective.
Right. But that's something that my parents still very much eat. My grandparents did. I still do upon occasion, and it is very odd and does not sound good. But if you grow up with that taste expectation, I mean, we all have a food. We may have multiple foods that are odd to people that are not us.
But that doesn't sound odd to me. Like, it sounds, buttermilk, it's sweet, it's rich, and then it gets like a little soggy, or the cornmeal gets a little soggy. And
well, it's like eating a bowl of cereal.
Yeah, a bowl of cereal,
you know?
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'll have to try it.
You have to try it, man.
But do in
Report
the
back.
glass and do with a spoon, and be open-minded. Think about the first time you ate a raw oyster or ate uni or ate whatever it is that had nothing to do with the way you grew up.
Right.
that's how you find out about the world.
Well, that's funny that you mentioned the oysters, because I did want to also highlight that on your website that you do have recipes from the episodes, and you
Yes.
have raw oysters on the half shell with spiced butter.
Yes.
You have Cheeti's aforementioned savory coconut cornmeal upma. I don't know what I'm saying. And of course, your own skillet cornbread and honey butter, which that was the most decadent thing I've ever seen. I'm like, oh, that's not the healthiest recipe I've seen. And on top of it, I mean, all that bacon fat that you put in there.
Okay. Whoa.
Hold on. I know. I'm throwing a lot of shade this way, but it's because it's
almost
ridiculous.
disappeared under the bus, so I need to climb back out. Okay. First of all,
You're going to tell me that your
Don't back it up, Max.
This cornbread recipe is healthy. That's what you're about to tell me?
I think that health is a relative thing.
Yes.
I think that everything I put in that pan is natural. It's identifiable. It came from a source I can name, and nobody's eating the whole cake of cornbread. I will also say that, yes, I put 3 tablespoons of bacon fat from pastured pork in the bottom of that. That's 3 tablespoons of fat for 8 to 12 servings. Put more fat in the dip you're putting your chicken nuggets in. I think that it is a slippery slope.
And more sugar in that.
And more sugar and all that.
Somewhere Pablo Escobar is like, yeah, but cocoa beans are natural too, right?
Yeah, and they are. But here's the thing. I think it is a slippery slope to start assigning health and value judgment to people's ingredients.
Okay, I will retract. My main thought
That's
was
good.
I laughed because you took that cornbread you made and just simply turned it over, and it fell right out onto a pan like it was or onto a plate. Just so effortless. And I looked at Felicia, I go, if I did that, there's no way in hell that thing would slide out.
It would if your pan's right. But no, again, and then I'm going to get down off my high horse. You should not get out from under the bus you've been thrown under and climb onto a high horse. It's not a good thing.
You might get the bends.
Yeah, exactly.
It's too high.
Exactly. But I will say, yes, in that entire cornbread recipe, there is 3 tablespoons of fat, and in the average pan of muffins, there is a stick of butter. It just looks different.
Okay.
Right. No, I think there's definitely something to that we get caught up in calories and fat content and
of course,
sugar.
right.
But when it's processed, in a plant and packaged good is much different than when it's an ingredient that's a part of a greater.
Aforementioned Mountain Dew is kind of the opposite of what we're talking about.
I think that people should open a jar and just eat off the end of the spoon 3 tablespoons of bacon fat every day? No.
Right.
Is there a way to make that cornbread without any pork fat? There is. On the website, I give 2 alternatives. If people have gluten issues, they can live off the flour. But the thing is that pay attention to the ingredients and try to make them as good as you can get, which doesn't mean exotic, obscure, or expensive. Be mindful of what your ingredients are.
Yeah.
And I think that and then if there's something delicious and decadent, enjoy it. And if it's, just be mindful.
I wish you could bottle all of that bacon fat. And if you did bottle that bacon fat, you maybe could purchase it at Triangle Wine Company. The worst segment.
Okay, I got to tell you.
Wait, where are you going with that? Because you probably can bottle that bacon fat.
I will tell you guys, and people have been amused by this, I use very, very few animal products in my cooking in my house. I'm making a show that I hope is useful to a lot of people that is genuinely me, but also not necessarily how I personally eat every day. I mean, there's a lot out there. I do sort my bacon fats by where they come from because they don't taste the same. I have a little fleet of jars of different kinds of fats.
Oh.
Because I use them as condiments, not props. And
Just swiftly, give me like 2 far-ranging examples of what one bacon fat is like versus another. Like what's an extreme variation of flavor?
An extreme variation of flavor would be Benton's bacon, wonderful Alan Benton and so forth, which is the smokiest, huskiest, most umami-filled thing. And it's like a tincture. I mean, you put in a drop, bing, and you've changed a recipe. Then you have something like Nooski's, which is a Midwestern bacon that's got a little bit sweeter profile, not as much smoke, but tremendous mouthfeel. That's going to be one thing. And then you get your average commercial bacon, which I may or may not use, and it's going to be incredibly sugary, very, very sweet, and will scorch in the pan before your bread is done. That's the difference between olive oils, between wines. Not all foods taste the same, and that's why ingredients are special.
I actually did a podcast in Alan Benton's Bacon's storeroom.
Yes,
His
that
room.
wonderful. And you will used to. Alan is one of my dearest friends, and I don't just say it because we've been. His uncles and my granddaddy worked together during the war. I've known that family for that long, and we tell people we're cousins because we like the look on their faces when we say that. People are like, "Is that true?" And Alan goes, "Could be." Could be.
He is a sweetheart.
Yeah, he's the sweetest man. Love that man. But anyhow, when my daughter was in 9th grade, she had to do heritage days at school where you had to bring something that was representative of your culture food. Alan and Sharon had just sent me a box of bacon and ham, and I had the box, and even the box smells like that smell. I mean, it's like the best smell in the world. And she took that box as her symbol of heritage days in 9th grade. Amen, honey.
They don't call
There
it
you
Smoky
go.
Mountains for nothing.
They don't call it Smoky
He
Mountains,
literally made those mountains smoky.
Yeah,
just
it
by
was
what
it was
they're doing.
Alan. Exactly. Before that, blue skies every day.
Exactly. Well, Sheri, thank you. Before we get out of here, I do want to give a nod to Triangle Wine Company, who is a fantastic retailer of fine wines and beers and tinctures and bitters and all those fabulous things that could help accompany a wonderful recipe that you may make from learning about it on the Key Ingredient. But you can visit trianglewineco.com, check out all their locations all over the Triangle, and make sure that you mention the NCFB promo code, and for a nice little discount perhaps while you're shopping. And while you're there,
You should pick up some Proof Alcohol ice cream. So, Sheri, this is something great for you because Proof Alcohol ice cream thinks differently about desserts. They start with ingredients like pumpkins, like you mentioned, and what could we do with them? Well, mix them with this delicious ice cream and liquor and booze and make a
pumpkin spiced ice cream,
ice cream
liquored
with,
up. It's
with
delicious.
liquor. It's 7% alcohol. It's got this beautiful creamy texture, a little boozy taste to it, and it's your dessert and your booze all in one. So proofalcoholicecream.com, and it's in the little red freezers at your Triangle Wine Company. If you're not next to a Triangle Wine Company, you can find it at a Lowe's or a Harris Teeter, and you will enjoy that as well. But
yeah, make sure that you are watching The Key Ingredient with Sheri Castle. New episodes every Thursday at 7:30 p.m. on PBS NC and the PBS Video app.
And YouTube.
And
YouTube. Roku. You can, if you want to see it, it is easily found at your viewing leisure.
It was so easy to find last night. We threw it on. So I implore you all, if you're not watching it, what else are you doing with your time? Come on.
It's 30 minutes. What were you going to be doing?
come
right?
on, it'll enrich your life. Yeah. Well, Sheri, thank you so much. Everybody out there, go check out The Key Ingredient, and you will learn and watch how to eat and drink extremely merrily.
Thank you all. This was fun.
Thanks for listening to the NC F&B podcast. And if you've stuck with us this long, review us on iTunes, and remember, 5 stars are encouraged.